Hello. It's been a while. Welcome back to That Film Blog UK podcast. I can't tell you what number episode it is, obviously, because I don't have that information at hand. But it's episode 19. I'm Luke, as always, and joined with Ollie, as always. Welcome.
Back, baby.
We're
Feel
back.
like we never left.
It may
We
have been
did, though.
18 months. We've been cooking hard in the stew for this one. We've been cooking hard.
Yeah, this has been stuck in development hell. This one here.
Yeah, this is 18 months of sort of creative output all in one.
But even then, it's this was first mooted 2 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, it was, and then it was meant to happen last summer.
Last year, and we missed it again. But we're here now, and
This year.
I think this is the best time to do it for reasons I'll get into a little bit later.
So that's exciting. As hinted at there, this is a bit of a themed episode. We're not doing the usual our superhero movie pitches or our usual Godzilla vs. Kong review. There's a few deep cuts there for fans. This time, we're looking at native filmmakers, in particular New Zealand. Am I right in saying that, Ollie?
Yeah, no, we're looking at New Zealand. We've got a couple films from New Zealand. I'm going to be talking about one from Australia as well. And then we'll also be talking about a very famous, well, it's not that famous, but relatively well-known TV series, which is entering its third season and final, I should add, which is why I said that I think this is the best time to do it, because we can reflect on the 2 seasons we've seen and also look ahead to the final season of the much-loved, but not that much seen, sadly, FX show Reservation Dogs.
I actually have some interesting trivia about that, but I'll save that because it's.
You'll save that. You'll save that.
It's a bit of a dampener, a spirit dampener.
Oh,
it's topical though. It's something to be excited for us, not for the person it involves, but for us.
Okay.
So should we dive in? We sort of the past week, I've been catching up on things I've never seen. Primarily, actually, I say entirely from Ollie's recommendation, and you have a bit of an affinity for this part of the world, which is probably part of the reason we're here today doing this.
That is true. I was very lucky enough to visit New Zealand, and I became friendly with some of the Indigenous people there, and great bunch of people that I met. A bit different to some of the people in the films that we've watched, but lovely people, and it sort of inspired this episode, like you say, and but we're not just, as we said, New Zealand, America and Australia as well. So basically anywhere the Brits have fucked up, we are there.
Yeah, cheers for that, Empire.
Charting the films, the creative output of the Indigenous peoples there. So where should we start, really?
See, that's a good question. I think we should start with, this is the one I watched first, Once Were Warriors.
Let's start there.
It's directed by Lee Tamahori, came out in 1994, right. And it stars everyone's favourite Mandalorian turned sort of separatist sort of tool during the Clone Wars, Temuera Morrison. Also recently in The Flash for like one scene, not relevant, but he is sort of the lead here in what I thought when I was going to watch it. I was thinking, oh, this will be like a bit of a drama with Temuera Morrison as sort of this stoic good guy trying to look after his family.
Where'd you get that idea from?
I don't know, just from the poster, and like I didn't read the full description on Letterboxd, so I missed the part at the end about abuse, which also we should say trigger warning for domestic violence. It's heavy stuff. So yeah, no, I had no idea that was coming. He basically go on.
I was just gonna say, yeah, it dives headfirst into a sort of a wealth of very serious issues, and it doesn't really let up till the end.
So what it is sort of a family drama about this Maori family in which Temuera Morrison plays Jake, who's the dad of the family. He is a horrible piece of work.
Jake the Muss.
Yeah, Yeah.
as he calls himself sometimes, and other people call him.
He wasn't a particularly pleasant character. But then you also have Rena Owen, who plays Beth. She's the mother in that family. Funnily enough,
She's the one keeping it all together.
And I'm just seeing this now. She's also in episodes 2 and 3 of the Star Wars prequel trilogy.
I read that.
I didn't know that. That's blown my mind a bit. But
I think they're the only two in the cast that, well, apart from, of course, Cliff Curtis, who went on to do big things. He's a big name now.
Oh, he's one of Jake's little buddies, right?
Uncle Bully.
Oh,
fittingly named.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good performances in here because it makes you really hate these people. Like, I like Tamora Morrison, but I watched this and thought, wow, horrible. So what it basically is, it looks at their life. I don't know whereabouts in Auckland it is.
It's South Auckland, yeah, which
Okay.
is sort of has a bit of a. When I was there, it had a bit of a reputation,
Right.
and the reputation is on show here.
Yeah, so it follows that family as we sort of see Jake being incredibly toxic, and then, Beth sort of trying to do right by her children, where she's got 2 sons, 2 daughters, I think. Definitely,
there's two very young ones. I don't know what gender they are.
But yeah, it's all about that family trying to navigate a really horrible, abusive scenario, and it's quite a hard watch.
It is hard. When we decided we were doing this again, I'd seen it before. I sort of weighed up whether I was willing to put myself through it again. But I thought, for the good of the podcast, I would. And yeah, it's bleak. But some of the performances are amazing. And yeah, it launched the careers of several actors.
What is worth mentioning before we get into more is that this film is available on Prime. Both the films we're jointly discussing are available on Prime. So UK, obviously, hence the name. So if you want to watch them, there's an opportunity there.
And I recommend you do watch both of them.
Yeah, Once for Warriors. Well, we'll cross another bridge when we get to another bridge. But Once for Warriors for me was, I came away thinking, how is this not more known about in wider film canon? Because it handles all these characters really well. It toes a line where it's not sort of, it's hard to watch, but it's the sort of thing that you really should, if you're able, sort of to deal with what goes on here, because it also shines a light on a culture and community that is so alien to ours, that was sort of just fascinating in itself, alongside the character drama, which is compounded by such strong performances, particularly from those 2 leads.
And I would also add the eldest daughter, who is played by, sorry, it's quite a long name, played by Mamaengaroa Turbell.
Plays Grace
Hecky, and she is in many ways the heart of the film. She's sort of watching this family go about their lives, and she says quite early on in the film that she hates her dad, Jake.
Yeah.
And there's one tragic scene which there are these 2 parties which happen in the film, and I saw this isn't my own reviewing, but I saw a Letterboxd review that said the first time it said "party at my place" is sort of seemingly quite innocuous, and it's just sort of, you see it's sort of just a plot point where we're going to party, we're going to see what happens now, and then as they get more and more drunk, the night sort of descends into quite violent domestic abuse. And it's very tough to watch. And interestingly, in that scene, the second time I watched it, I sort of noticed that the only reason it happens is because, well, obviously the reason it happens is because he's a violent man, but what triggers his violence in this sense is her throwing the eggs on the floor when he unfairly demands that she cook up some eggs for his friend Bully, and she's only so agitated in that moment because she's been upset by her eldest son, whose name is Nig. That is the
Yeah,
name.
it is. Yeah, it is.
And he's sort of we don't see too much of him. He's joining a gang of sorts, and it's sort of, he says at one point in the film, "I don't have any family. This gang is my new family." So yeah, the eldest son is pushed away from, obviously, by the violence of his father and sort of the unhealthy environment that his family lives in. He's pushed towards this sort of gang culture, and yeah, he's sort of in and out of the house. You don't see him very often, but his role in the film is, I think, very important in demonstrating how sort of young men are pushed into these sort of things, which probably aren't, in the grand scheme of things, that good for them. But yeah, what is it that happens? Yeah, she slaps him after he makes a comment.
Yeah.
And then and then she's immediately very apologetic, and goes to make him some food, which is why she has the eggs. And then he just walks out immediately because he doesn't want anything to do with it. I'm rambling.
No, you're making a valid point. I think the whole film is sort of, not necessarily from Jake's perspective, but from the other three characters who are the focus, is all about the ways in which that people in that community try and cope with their reality or do what they can to leave it in any way, which happens to varying degrees of severity. But as you say, I feel like the whole that scene you're talking about is probably like 40 minutes in, maybe.
I think it's earlier.
Yeah, I feel like the whole film completely switches and flips on its head as soon as that happens. Things become a lot more intense, and it doesn't really let up from there. It is very bleak, but there is still an underlying, because the Beth especially is faced with such a horrible situation, but she never gives up on sort of doing right by her children, and finding ways to improve their lives, and it comes often at a tragic cost, both emotionally and physically, in terms of pain. But there is definitely an uplifting message.
Is this a spoiler, or are you recommending? I don't really.
I think we avoid spoilers.
Yeah, but there's domestic abuse. There's sadly, sexual abuse. But there's also, like you say, there's also a lot to be uplifted about. For example, the second oldest boy, he's early on, he has to go to court for, we're not quite sure why.
No.
But he's involved in sort of minor criminal activity, and he is sent to a sort of state school for boys. That becomes a very galvanizing experience for him, and that's through sort of an appreciation of the sort of the culture, the Maori culture, and that's one of the more uplifting parts of the film. And then I'd say the ending is uplifting.
It's realism, is what it is. It's not sort of the Saka and like everything's happily ever after, because it's not.
Not at all.
But it's a little more sort of honest with how these situations can play out.
But it's a very powerful film that shines a light on a community that is, like you say, very far from our own and sort of not too seen at all. Even within Maori culture, sort of South Auckland is very different to the experience of a lot of other Maori people.
Yeah.
But if you want something to make you think, that might or will almost definitely upset you, make you angry, which some people like, I recommend Once Were Warriors wholeheartedly.
It's heavy, but it's brilliant.
It's brilliant. My one criticism of it would be the flashy editing and the weird sound effects kind of lessen the impact of some of the scenes. That would be my one criticism.
It can be a bit 90s in that sense.
Yeah, but I think that is just like you say, 90s. Of its time. And Lee Tamahori went on to great things. Check notes. Oh no, he directed the XXX sequel.
Oh.
But Lee Tamahori did direct So technically, this is an Indigenous filmmaker film. Die
Hmm.
Another Day.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it, so why don't we speak it into existence? Lee, hop on.
Lee Tamahori, come on the podcast. We'll have a little natter.
It
We
worked
can
last
even-
time.
We'll even butter you up and say how fantastic XXX State of the Union is, or is it Triple X? I don't know how you say it.
No, I don't know. Although that one's definitely my favourite of the whole lot. So, Lee,
Really? Have you seen that?
I've seen none of them. Although I would if Lee Tamahori
Vin
was
Diesel's
coming.
not even in the second one. It's Ice Cube and Willem Dafoe.
Let's move on to our next film.
Sensible. We've been sidetracked there by the outstanding career of Lee Tamahori.
We have. This is probably the most prolific filmmaker out of New Zealand. I think is sort of
Easily. I think he has
undeniable.
I think with this, when this film we're about to talk about came out, it became the highest grossing film in New Zealand, and then he did another one set in New Zealand that broke that record.
So we're obviously talking about Taika Waititi. The guy has been on the mainstream scene now for, well, since Thor Ragnarok in 2017. Although what we do in the shadows isn't small, but obviously he is now a blockbuster director. He's got a contract with Star Wars, and he's obviously been behind 2 Thor films and had a hand in some of the Avengers world. But Boy, which is the film we're discussing, also available on Prime, is, like you say, sort of where he made a name for himself on a larger scale.
It was his second feature film. His first was called Eagle versus Shark, which is just a rom-com set in Wellington, I believe, which I have seen, which is good, fine. But I'm a huge fan of Boy. A lot of people are. I remember first watching it, and I thought it was charming, funny, but it's also got a real heart, and there's some real sadness embedded into the film, as there is in a lot of his work, I think. In fact, I remember watching a video essay about his sort of sad comedy style. But it's about a young boy who calls himself Boy. I can't actually remember if his name is Boy. I think it is.
No, his real name, Alamein, it says.
Alamein, yes, like his father.
Yeah, he's sort of our leading character.
And he's played by James Wollaston, who went on to do a few things. I think he's in another quite famous New Zealand film, which I haven't seen.
He did a few TV shows as well.
The main point of this film is Taika Waititi plays Boy's father. And it's about his relationship with his father. His father isn't present at the start of the film. His father is in jail, something he gets mocked for at school. But at the start, we're introduced to Boy, and he's talking about his father, and has all these sort of elaborate lies about his father, which aren't true. As a schoolmate of his quickly says, that's not true. Your dad's in jail. So it's about this young boy's coping, I guess, all of that bit. But his father then quickly comes home.
Played by Taika Waititi. Played
by the writer-director, Taika Waititi. And I'll hand over to my co-presenter here, and I'll ask him what he thought of the film.
So maybe I'm just not a Taika Waititi. Well, I know I'm not really a Taika Waititi fan, so it probably didn't help. I just didn't find it as sort of engaging compared to Once for Warriors necessarily. I like some of it. I thought it's got the sort of purity and innocence of the sort of coming of agey film, but I was never quite as gripped by like the sort of boy's obsession with his dad and the admiration he felt and how that sort of plays out through the film, because that doesn't necessarily stay on sort of a flat level in terms of his attitude towards his dad and how that sort of plays into how he treats other people, which is sort of an interesting arc he goes through, because a lot of it, like you say, is sort of, everyone knows someone who says their dad played for Manchester United or whatever. Like it is, you hear this sort of thing, and it's interesting to see a more frank side of what it actually is, because when you meet Taika Waititi's character, he isn't obviously anything that we've been suggested he is. But but I don't. Maybe just because I'm not a Taika Waititi fan, he plays such a big role in it. I didn't find it quite as sort of, I don't know, engaging on a emotional level as Once More is. But obviously, it is still sweet. There are moments that I think are really sweet. Boy's relationship with his little brother Rocky, and his sort of belief that he has superpowers, is one of my favorite parts. I thought that was a brilliant character, and it is a sweet film. But you can sort of see the flair in this that goes on in Taika Waititi's big sort of budget stuff. The DNA is definitely there.
Yeah, you sort of, when his father returns, you sort of see a change in Boy. He sort of becomes more confident, almost a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
But he's just trying to impress his father, and his father at times doesn't really want that much to do with him.
No.
And it's quite sad to see in that sense. But then we sort of, the more we learn about the father, I think it all comes. I thought it all came together nicely. I haven't seen it for a while now, to be fair. I was meant to watch it, but I just couldn't get around to it. And we sort of learn about a bit more about him. There's a mother. Boy and his siblings are raised by their grandma, and who is his mum's mother, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because she doesn't much like the dad.
Yeah, she's not a huge fan of Alamein, the father. But I sort of think behind the bravado of Taika Waititi's character, that we initially see, is sort of a brokenness, and I think that's what I like about the film. I think, and at the end, I think you sort of see that comes right to the fore. You sort of see that, at the heart of all this macho nonsense is something that's broken, and it's exactly the same. Actually, bringing it back to Once for Warriors as Once for Warriors, because we do sort of see a reason potentially as to why Jake the Muss is the way he is. He wasn't good enough, basically, in the eyes of Beth's parents. They come from different tribes, and he comes from a family of slaves. Is what we learn, and I think that is that's something that the two films, even though they are wildly different in tone and just about everything else, apart from being centered on Maori culture, at the heart of that is the men in these two films, the father figures who have so much influence on the people around them, are broken and in desperate need of sort of mending and fixing.
There are like themes in both of fatherhood and how kind of both of them shy away from their responsibilities and their duties as fathers in very different ways. Neither of them good, obviously. And it sort of also touches on childhood, how everyone idolizes their parents, and you even see it in the very last line of the film, which I won't say, but it is quite touching in that sense. And obviously, as I say, it has all the Waititi flair. There is a dance scene at the very end that is completely at odds with sort of the rest of the tone of the film and how it ends, which is interesting if you're a fan of him.
Is it over the credits, or is it just...
It's halfway through the credits, it sort of pops up, because I was just the film was over, so I was just on my phone, and then a few minutes in, this something really you don't expect happens. So that was a choice.
Just let Taika cook.
One thing you do have to say about him, whether you like his films or not, is that he does have a very distinct vision for what he does. He obviously knew exactly what he wanted to say with this film, and said it in interesting ways. Visually, it's sort of always, like a lot of his films, it's very fast paced. It's very it's got a lot of flair on a filmmaking perspective. But maybe it was just the father son dynamic wasn't, as sort of the family drama, quite as gripping as in Once for Warriors for me.
I would say, having been to New Zealand and sort of more rural New Zealand, it's very, very similar. It's a perfect depiction from at least from what I saw, and it's also very loved there, and it was quoted to me a lot. Want to see some Michael Jackson dance moves? That's a classic line that I was quoted several times, and like I said, it was the highest grossing film, I think, when it came out in New Zealand. So it sort of had a big cultural impact there, and a lot of people related to it and enjoyed it, I think, until it was broken by Taika Waititi's. I think it was his next film set there. I might be wrong. Hunt for the Wilder People.
Yeah.
Oh no, he did.
He did
I
What
think
We
that's
Do
the
in the
next film he
Shadows.
directed on his own, but he co-directed that with Jermaine of Flight of the Conchords fame.
This is true.
Which is actually probably my favourite Taika Waititi film, maybe. Tied up there with Boy, because that's just pure comedy, pure genius. But enough about that. Should we move on?
Yes, I want to. So those are the only two I saw, but you obviously have a broader wealth of knowledge. So I would like to unpick that.
We can certainly unpick that. So we're gonna hop over the Tasman Strait, as it's called, which is the sea between New Zealand and Australia, and I'm going to talk about a film directed by Warwick Thornton, who I believe he's only directed 2 films, but he is an Aboriginal man from Australia, of course, born and raised in Alice Springs, which is sort of the most well-known, I think, town that is deep in the Australian outback. I believe the film is set around that area. I'm not entirely sure, but it's a film called Samson and Delilah, and it tells the story of 2 young Aboriginal people, a boy and a girl, who are called Samson and Delilah. Obviously named after. Well, I say obviously. I only know this because I actually watched this with my parents. I somehow wrote them into it, and they actually really enjoyed it. But they told me that it's Samson and Delilah are biblical characters. So I'm not going to be able to talk about the biblical messaging in the film because I don't read the Bible. Sorry,
guys.
But no, it's about a young guy and a young girl called Samson and Delilah. Samson, this is another film that could be described as poverty porn, much like Once Were Warriors. That is definitely, and as a white viewer, I could be called voyeuristic, but they're fascinating films. And Samson Delilah. Samson is a young guy who lives. We don't really know too much about his family, but he's woken up every morning by these 3 guys who are playing this same old song. It's kind of this. I think it's ska is the genre.
Oh yeah.
Sort of reggae type ska music, and they play it every morning, and it wakes him up every morning. We learn this over the sort of we see sort of 3 days in his life at the very start of the film. We're also, it's the same song. You hear them day and night playing this one song, which is quite a source of amusement. And every morning he also picks up the guitar because he wakes up before his brother. He plays the guitar and he's horrible at the guitar, and his brother comes out and immediately takes it off him and starts playing. And then there's Delilah, who at the start of the film we see her sort of looking after her grandmother, or it could be her great grandmother. It's never not made crystal clear. She and her grandmother do these sort of Aboriginal style. I don't know if that's obviously very broad style, but it's not a style of painting that I was particularly familiar with. Of sort of finger dot paintings, and they do these paintings together, and she looks after her grandmother and takes her to church, which is literally a corrugated metal hut with a bit of wood, I think, for the cross, and it's just a room. And she takes her to church in this wheelchair, and the health centre as well.
Yeah.
It happens early on in the film where Delilah's grandmother dies, and that sets in motion the events that occur in the film, which also the other. Basically, it's about these Samson and Delilah basically run off together.
Okay.
They run away from their town. This happens after the grandmother dies, and the family seemingly blames Delilah, and a few of the matriarchal figures come to her house, start beating her, and that's kind of her moment that encourages her to leave, and then
Yeah.
Samson clearly gets sick of hearing this song
Don't
and
blame him.
attacks his brother with a
Oh.
stick, which initially knocks his brother out before his brother gains consciousness and attacks him quite more brutally. So yeah, we sort of see this quite dysfunctional community, very poor. I should add that the paintings were being sold by this white man who was in it for maybe a minute. I think maybe he owns the land that they're on or something, but he clearly takes the paintings. And as we later see on their travels, these paintings are being sold for an extortionate fee.
Scum.
Which obviously was the Delilah and her grandmother were never seeing a penny of.
No.
So they go on this sort of journey and they flee this community, and it's a very simple film. Really, not that much happens. They run out of gas and start living under this sort of bridge with this white homeless man who sort of speaks to them. They rarely converse at all, if ever, I think. Samson and Delilah, which I think was a very interesting choice. I'm sure if I thought about it a bit harder, I could read into that a little bit, but you're often just watching them. Okay.
So it's quite dialogue free.
Yeah, there's not that much dialogue. The white homeless man speaks to them, and even he helps them and gives them food. But at one point he says, you're not having any food unless you tell me what your names are. And then Samson speaks, I think, for the first time in the film. Then he sort of has a stutter and says Samson. We learn about these two characters, and they flee this community that is so harshly treated by the white Australians. Of course, it's not enjoyable watch. It's quite depressing to watch them. They become basically homeless, and then there's events that happen that are, again, the style is not, nothing's ever really dwelled on that much.
Yeah.
It just sort of, like, something happens to Delilah. She gets kidnapped.
Jesus.
And attacked. Again, we don't know if it was just assault or if there was sort of a sexual nature to it. It's not too clear. But Samson doesn't realise, and this is a plot point I have slightly glossed over, is because at the start of the film, every morning he wakes up and sniffs glue. And that is, again, similar to, sadly, what we've seen in the films, the New Zealand films, is that there's more Once Were Warriors. I guess this is the sort of coping mechanisms that these Indigenous people have. And he sniffs glue at the start, and then once they've fled their home, he sort of siphons off petrol from cars and starts sniffing that. And he is so high and so out of it that he doesn't realise. Twice the shot is following Samson in the foreground and Delilah's following him in the background, and twice something bad happens to her, and because he's so out of it, he doesn't realise.
It's heavy.
It is heavy. It's not as sort of in your face heavy as Once Were Warriors. It kind of more just weighs on you. And so bad stuff happens to her, and he doesn't realise, basically. And he obviously cares about her. And at one point, he does turn around because she gets kidnapped, put in a car, and once the car does a sort of quite loud handbrake turn almost, he suddenly realises and runs after her.
Yeah.
But I think that's possibly a statement on how a lot of what has happened to women in the community goes unnoticed by the men, or I don't know.
It's interesting.
Like I said, not too much happens. You're just sort of watching them, but it's a very powerful film. Even though not much happens, and my parents have low attention spans, they were invested and engaged for 90 minutes or so, and they both really liked it as well. And it does have an optimistic ending. Without spoiling it, we find out where the song is, and that's kind of quite a beautiful moment in the film. And we learn why this song means so much to these people, this family, presumably. So yeah, this was Warwick Thornton's debut film. It won the Camera d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, which is the award for best debut feature. And I don't know what else was up for it that year, but it thoroughly deserved it, in my opinion. It's a very powerful film, very simple, clearly made on a very low budget. But the performances from the two central actors are just amazing. They do so much amazing work, like I said, with almost no dialogue, and it's all in their faces. And yeah, it's a powerful film, one that I highly recommend. And I also recommend his follow-up feature film, which didn't come out for, I think, 10 or 11 years after Samson and Delilah, which is called Sweet Country, which is also set in Australia. I can't remember exactly when in Australia, but it's sort of much earlier in Australia as we know its existence. And it follows a man who, defending himself, kills a white man. It's about that.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
I haven't seen that so recently, so I recommend that as well. Warwick Thornton, he's a very brave and talented filmmaker. Yeah, hopefully there's more Aboriginal filmmakers doing important work. I would like to see it. I'm sure there are.
Absolutely.
Warwick Thornton sort of broke into the more mainstream in a way that's, I think, very admirable. And finally,
for people that don't like films and they want to watch TV,
for something more short length, 20 to 30 minutes, the episodes are, Reservation Dogs, FX. I'm going to be honest with you. It's my favorite thing on television at the moment. When it first came out, I likened it to Atlanta in terms of its style, as well as its sort of shining a spotlight and being completely written and created by people from a certain community. But I think as the show's grown on, it's kind of, I'd much prefer it to Atlanta now, and I really like Atlanta as a show. But I think this has so much more heart, and it feels more authentic. I think Atlanta, not that we're here to talk about Atlanta, but I think Atlanta got quite arty and a bit smug. Personally.
Yeah.
Whereas this is thoroughly grounded. 2 seasons I've seen. The 3rd season has come out in America, or it started to. I think they're released weekly. And that is because the very first episodes were released on the 9th of August, and this is the reason we are doing this podcast today. The 9th of August is the International Day of the World's Indigenous People.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. Absolutely right.
Do you want to hear my Reservation Dogs fact?
I would like to hear it now.
So, I saw this tweet a few weeks ago, and I managed to find it now. It's let me find the name of the person. They play the character Bev. Jana Schmieding, I believe, plays the character Bev.
Yes.
Tweeted her quarterly residuals check from Disney for the show. So every quarter she gets 3 cents in residuals.
Right. Is this for Reservation Dogs?
From
Bev.
Reservation Dogs, yes. So I saw that and I thought that's a bit grim. So while we're here, we'll just say shout out the strikers. I ain't talking early.
Very good idea. Thank you.
But yeah, that's my contribution to the Reservation Dogs conversation here. A little bit of a down.
An important one.
Yeah. It does sound like a fun show.
Sure. That's writers and actors.
It's also Taika Waititi's hand in here, which is a bit of a theme.
Yeah.
Like the guys.
I think he was just a name.
Just to get it.
So he's credited as a co-creator, but I don't think he has anything to do with the day-to-day running of the show. That's
right.
Run by Sterling Harjo. Reservation Dogs follows 4 friends who call themselves the Res Dogs. Obviously a reference to Reservoir Dogs. So you've got Bear, Elora, Cheese, and Willie Jacks, who is, I think, the breakout character. I think that's the general consensus amongst fans, is that Willie Jacks is the breakout character. So that's 2 girls, 2 guys. Bear and Cheese are the guys. Bear sees himself as the leader of the group, and Laura also sees herself as a bit of the leader of the group. I'd say they're kind of the main 2, but they're also there's tension between the 2 characters. But yeah, they and the whole show is anchored in the fact that initially the Res Dogs were a 5-man team.
Right.
Their friend Daniel died before the show starts, and his presence is sort of felt throughout the entire show. So many episodes have touched on his death, and it's palpable, and it's very sad. But the first series follows their attempts to save up enough money to leave.
Right.
Again, sort of seemingly a common theme. Leave their reservation, which is in Oklahoma.
Okay.
I think Sterling Harjo, I think all his work has been set in and around Oklahoma, and because that's where a lot of the Indigenous American reservations are. That's where they were forced by the imperialistic government policies of the United States of America.
Ooh.
But yeah, so it's sort of the first series follows them saving up enough money, but there's also lots of episodes that just sort of focus on one character. For example, there's an episode where Laura goes for her driving test and stuff happens. Her driving instructor is actually, funnily enough, Bill Burr. He's excellent in that episode. Who knew?
Oh.
Yes, there's been lots of guest stars.
Wow.
Garrett Hedlund was in one. Megan Mullally, just a few names. But yeah, it's completely cast and crew. It's completely, apart from obviously a few white actors.
Yeah.
The cast and crew is completely Indigenous, which I think is very good, very important as well. It's brilliantly acted. It's got its own style. Like I said, I initially likened it to Atlanta, but it's become wholly its own thing.
Yeah.
And one of the main characters, Bear, has this hallucination. Is it a hallucination? Is it real? Of this sort of this tribal warrior. I can't remember his name. I'm just going to get it. Who's very funny. William Knifeman, a self-proclaimed warrior who died at the Battle of Little Bighorn, although he did not do any fighting because he was charging towards the Battle of Bighorn. We learn this in the show, and his horse trips on a rock, and he's crushed by his horse. And he's now a spirit helping Indigenous people with whatever they may need. So he's a very funny character. But honestly, it's a very important show. But that's not why you should watch it. You should watch it because it's genuinely funny. So many people I've seen say this, and it's something I agree with. Maybe not every episode, but some people have said that almost every episode you're laughing and then you're crying as well. I remember the series 2 finale just completely knocked me for 6. It honestly did. I think I was home alone that night. I was just watching it late in the night, and I sobbed.
Oh, man.
Usually when I'm watching something, I cry, and occasional sniff, tear rolls down. That's all it is. Series 2 finale. I don't know what it was, but it got me.
It gets your claws in.
Very powerful.
It sounds. I was going to say it sounds like an easy watch up until that.
But it's not even like it is an easy watch. It is an easy watch, but there is an underlying sadness that is always there, and I think that's what makes it such powerful viewing. And I'm very excited for the 3rd series. One of the reasons it was such a powerful moment is that it kind of felt like closure, even though by the time I watched it, it had been announced that there was going to be a 3rd series. I'm interested to see where they go from there. I can't. I've been raving about it to Luke for so long. I've sent probably so many messages. I've told so many people to watch it, and I don't think a single person I've recommended to has watched it. Sadly,
I will. I genuinely
I just
will.
want to talk about it. I just want to talk about it with someone.
If you're listening and you've seen it,
it's easy to watch. Yeah, please. If you're listening and you see it, just drop me an email. You have my email, maybe. I'm trying to think of more to say about it, because I can't rave enough about the show. It's the best thing on television now that Better Call Saul's finished.
we miss it.
but not the Emmys nominated, but the Emmys are a sham anyway.
Scum.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me laugh, makes me cry.
What more do
Gorgeous,
you want?
brilliant television.
And it is
And
on
it's
Disney
not-
Plus.
It is readily available on Disney Plus. Annoyingly, they seem to wait about 2 months after the American release to put it on UK Disney Plus, which infuriates me. I want to get my hands on these new episodes now. Although to be fair, it might be because they release them weekly, whereas
They just dump it here.
this whole, yeah, I think they do dump it because no one watches it apparently, which is possibly fair. It's not really for me or UK audience, but it's amazing and
you love it regardless.
Critics love it. Everyone loves it that watches it. It needs to be bigger than it is, and hopefully one day it will be. Get the audience it deserves. I don't know what its viewing figures are like, but
it must be good enough to justify its existence for 3 seasons.
I think, but I think FX is quite good at sort of sticking with stuff that then it knows is good. Well, I'm trying to think of. I feel like I haven't. Even though I've been saying it's the best thing on television, I still don't think I've done Reservation Dogs justice. Pauline Alexis, I'll quickly give a quick shout out to. She plays Willie Jacks. She is stellar, amazing. The whole cast is, but she is probably the standout. Watch it.
It's out there.
Watch it. I'm thinking of rewatching it because I think by the time I finish season 3, will hopefully be out, and that'll tide me over.
Yeah, if that's not endorsement enough, people, what is?
Unfortunately, most of it will have to get cut because it's mostly repetition. But
no.
I enjoyed talking about it.
Well, there we are.
I think we're near the end.
Yeah, if you've got anything from this, I hope you've got some new recommendations to watch. I know certainly Once for Warriors is sort of instantly shot up as one of those films that will always sort of be a bit special. Maybe not Boy. Maybe I'll rewatch that one day. Maybe not. But
I'm always up for rewatching. It's kind of one of my comfort films, actually.
Really? Mine are Jackass. I just watched the Jackass.
Yeah, one time I was feeling low and I put it on. It's up there with School of Rock for me. You don't like Jack Black, I know, which is weird.
Never seen School of Rock. Never will. Maybe one day we'll do an episode on.
No, you should. School of Rock is.
We should do an episode on
School of Rock is in his best.
Like films that we don't like that everyone else likes. Sort of hot takes. Nobody steal that, because I'll know.
Yeah. And if you do steal it, don't tell us that you liked this episode.
No,
we're helping you steal our idea. Actually, don't know why we're doing it.
Yeah. Well, do
right.
Everybody.
Let's get some grub.
Yeah, it's dinner time for me. Ollie, it's been a pleasure as always. We're back. We're back.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a long time coming. I feel like I haven't done the development. Such a long-awaited episode. I feel like I've not done. I'd like to be the best I can be.
I think you've been pretty damn good.
This guy's far too complimentary. You
say how it is.
You're my rock. Always on this podcast.
Well, that's too kind. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
As always. Catch you later.
Hopefully it won't be 18 months till the next one.
No, I've got a good feeling that it won't be quite as long.